This is Let's Talk Sports Radio with Sports Guy Jordan Armenise.
All right to the water, all right to the pitch.
Brought to you by Gino's Pizzeria on 94.9 Bob FM.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
My voice is shot because the Toronto Raptors are one game away for the NBA championship. Their first. Unbelievable. I apologize in advance. I got to let all you, the fans, talk today. We got great stuff lined up for you. UFC number 7 bantamweight fighting on the main card tonight. Jimmie Rivera joins us. Also, TSN reporter extraordinaire from Chicago, Aaron Bronsteter, joins us to run down the card. We're going to do the UFC 238 preview. Plus, we're going to holla for your $5. Gino's Pizzeria vouchers given out for all your hot takes. Set them to 529-1949. Episode 2 of Let's Talk Sports Radio. My voice is a mess. Help me, K-Man. The Raptors are one win away from their first NBA title. Crazy, crazy week in sports, folks. Absolutely mental. Andy Ruiz knocks out Anthony Joshua the same day I speak to Deontay Wilder last week. Does that fight have any value left? You tell me. I say they've lost a little bit of money. We're going to hear from that. Plus, remember, there's hockey still going on. The St. Louis Blues are up 3-2 against the Boston Bruins in the Stanley Cup Final. So much to talk about. I wish I hadn't yelled so much last night watching the game. But this card tonight, UFC 238, it's one of the best of the year. If you're a fan of the 135 weight class, it's an absolute thriller. Not to mention the prelims are even absolute lit as well. So we got Aaron, he's the best in Canada, my friends. No better. Great show coming up. Again, stream us, bobfm.ky. Giving out $5 Gino's vouchers as I drink tea. Coming back, Let's Talk Sports Radio, brought to you by Gino's Pizzeria. All right, welcome back to Let's Talk Sports Radio. MMA's top reporter in Canada, TSN's Aaron Bronsteter, joins us live from Chicago. Aaron, how are you?
I'm good, man. I was just saying, shout out to Gino's Pizzeria because they have thin crust, which is the way to go.
Buddy.
And Chicago is known for deep dish and it's trash, so shout out to them.
This card tonight is, if you like 135 weight class, it's incredible. So start with the main event. Flyweight champ Henry Cejudo versus Marlon Moraes. Both are on 4-fight win streaks. Last guy to go up from a lower weight class, it was Holloway, and he got smashed by Poirier. What do you think of this fight?
I think this could be a similar situation. I think that Henry Cejudo is used to fighting flyweights that just don't hit as hard as a guy like Marlon Moraes. And when he's in there with Marlon Moraes, if he's not able to withstand that power early, it could be a very, very short night for Henry Cejudo. Now, Henry Cejudo is a very, very obviously skilled wrestler. He's a gold medalist from the Olympics. But he hasn't really utilized his wrestling in the same way that like a Khabib or Tatiana Suarez is also on this card. He doesn't really hold people down. So a lot of Cejudo's fights take place on the feet. And his striking is really, really improved from a technical standpoint. Obviously, he was able to put out T.J. Dillashaw, but T.J. Dillashaw was cutting down to 125 for the first time in his career. Now you've got the kind of the opposite effect. You've got Cejudo going back up to 135 after quite a long hiatus from doing that and having not really fought top 135ers early on in his career. I think that this is really Moraes' fight to lose, and that, if you look at the odds for this fight, I think they're pretty wild because I think Moraes should be a much bigger favorite. I might be completely wrong on this. Henry Cejudo's proven me wrong in the past. What he did to T.J. Dillashaw was incredible. Who's to say he can't do it again? But Marlon's got a great chin. His only loss in the UFC was a very controversial split decision. He's the best guy at bantamweight right now, and I don't know if Henry Cejudo is going to be able to overcome that.
Yeah, we're going to play an interview with Jimmie Rivera that I interviewed earlier this week. He said Marlon's size is going to be a big advantage. Marlon Moraes is ripped. That's the first thing I see when I watch him fight. He's powerful and he's ripped. And you look at you can go on your Twitter at Aaron Bronsteter to see these weigh-ins. I think this is the size going to be the power, the size going to be in play here.
I'm not sure the size is going to be as much of a factor as people say, but I think that it's fighting somebody of that size is what the difference is going to be. You know, he's used to fighting smaller guys. 125ers are just generally smaller guys. Like Marlon Rice would never be able to make 125. TJ was a smaller 35er and really pushed himself to the limit to make 125. But having to fight a guy that's used to fighting at 35, that's used to facing the power of 35, that's used to feeling guys that are big, you know, are of that size, not people that are moving up to that size, it's going to be a big advantage for Marlon.
All right. What's the deal with Henry Cejudo? What's with all the costumes? He's a smack talker. You know, he's a gold medalist. Obviously, he's going, you know, into elite class if he wins a double, becomes double champ tonight. What is his what's his motive for doing this? Is this just what kind of person is he? Obviously, you've interviewed him. There's an interview you have with him on tsn.ca and on your Twitter. What's his motive behind, you know, the crown and all this stuff?
There was a great piece that Sean Al-Shadi did for The Athletic this week where he went to the baseball game with Henry Cejudo. And Cejudo basically said the reason why he's doing this kind of thing is actually for the fighters. And hear me out here. He felt that Demetrius Johnson was not doing what it took to get the flyweight division on the map promotionally. He was pretty boring in interviews. He refused to move up to bantamweight. He was respectful to all of his opponents. Cejudo basically does kind of cringy stuff in his personal life. Like, that's kind of the guy he is. And the advice that Chael Sonnen gave him was amp that up by 10. Make that your thing so that you can have a personality that even if they boo you, that means they care about you. So that's what he's doing. He's trying to do this to invigorate the division and to have people care about him as a champion. Now, when I interviewed him yesterday, I kind of took him aside in the interview and said, you're doing all of this, you know, the shtick with your crown and all that stuff. But I think the more relatable thing about you is that you come from really humble beginnings. Like, he came from poverty. He came from a poor family. He didn't sleep in his own bed until he was at the Olympic Training Center prior to the Olympics. Like, that's how poor they were. They lived in a trailer, and he was born to two illegal immigrants that had moved from Mexico to America and overcame those odds, became a gold medalist in the Olympics, became a UFC champion. And that kind of work ethic, I feel like it's something that you can relate to. And I don't know, he doesn't really see it the same way. You know, he likes doing his shtick, and that's fine, and it's fun for him. But I just think that people need to look through that and look at who Henry Cejudo is and really get a respect for the man that he is and what he's gone through in his life. All
right, prediction. Who you got?
Well, I think from my analysis, it's pretty clear that I like Marlon Rice in this one.
All right, fair enough. Speaking of work ethic, Valentina Shevchenko, first title defense at flyweight after winning it in December versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Jessica Ai, who barely made weight yesterday. I follow Shevchenko on Twitter. I feel like she just works out 12 months a year. She's just a machine. She's like the closest thing to like a Rocky villain that you've ever seen. Like, she's just absolute locked in focus. This should be a good fight. Tell me a little bit about what do you think about it?
Yeah, well, Jessica Ai, I don't think it's really fair to say that she almost didn't make weight. I mean, she had 40 minutes left or something like that to weigh in. She made the weight on her first attempt. So I don't really want to make that an issue. I don't think it is one. However, I do think that there is a big skill gap here, and that Valentina's better pretty much everywhere. I mean, I think that the one way that Jessica Ai can make this difficult on Shevchenko is closing the distance, you know, getting into boxing range and putting out output to stifle Valentina, and that might be her only really, unless Gray Maynard has taught her really high level wrestling, I think that might be her only real path to victory. But Jessica Ai has overcome the odds. She lost 4 in a row at bantamweight. They open up the flyweight division, and now she has the longest winning streak in the flyweight division. And I think flyweight is the division where she will excel. However, I just don't see anybody in that division right now that's going to be able to give Shevchenko any problems. Now, if Tatiana Suarez were to move up to 125, now we're talking about a little bit of a different story. But I mean, who knows? She's the biggest favorite on the card. Upsets happen. Jessica Ai is talented. We'll see how it goes, but I just don't know who's going to be able to beat Valentina Shevchenko at that weight class right now.
The people's main event, this fight next, is going to be insane. I think everybody's looking forward to this. The return of Tony Ferguson after some personal issues against Cowboy Donald Cerrone. who is on an absolute tear right now. This could potentially be a title eliminator for the lightweight belt, no?
Yeah, I think that it should be, but you also have Conor McGregor looming, and whenever Conor McGregor wants, Conor McGregor gets, because he's the cash cow that the promotion has. So, if you watch the weigh-ins yesterday, Cerrone said to Dana White on the stage, is the winner of this fight guaranteed a title shot? And Dana said, let's see tomorrow, we'll talk. So he's not making any promises, and I don't think that that's a good sign for both Cerrone and Ferguson. Now, this should be for the number one contendership if, for whatever reason, Conor still doesn't want to come back, or there's any hesitation for Conor to come back. That's kind of what is going on with this division. The division's moving on as per normal, unless Conor McGregor decides to come back in, which is kind of unfair to the fighters, but, this is a promotion more so than a sport, so we have to always keep that in mind. I do think that the winner of this fight warrants a title shot, but we'll see what happens.
What do you make of Tony Ferguson's story? Obviously, he's had a great fight almost 10 months ago now, or against on that card between Khabib and Conor, Sir Anthony Pettis rather, and then Cerrone just reels off 4 in a row. Kind of have a resurrected second life in his career. What's the technically wise? How do you see this fight breaking down?
It's hard to really explain how it's going to break down, because both of these guys are flow fighters. Donald Cerrone never studies his opponents before his fight. Before he fought Darren Till, a fight that he lost, he said he had never heard of Darren Till. And I said, well, are you going to watch any tape on him? He goes, no, I'm not going to watch any tape on him. And that's just how he approaches things. He worries about himself and not his opponent. And Tony Ferguson is the same way, because Tony Ferguson is so unpredictable and so herky-jerky and has so many different weapons that I don't think that he does focus on his opponent, because he's so dangerous everywhere. Both these guys are. So that's going to be the interesting thing to me, is which of these people ends up having a better night. And I think that's going to be what it comes down to. I know that sounds weird and cliche, because whoever has the better night usually wins, but sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes you can be in there giving it your all and you're just not as good as your opponent. But I think that just whoever shows up more than the most tonight is going to win, if that makes any sense. No,
absolutely. Fair enough. So who do you got?
I like Tony. I just think Tony has more tools. And but I've been picking against Cerrone for a while, and he seems to continue to win. So I might not be the best expert on deciding who's going to defeat Donald Cerrone, because Cerrone's just been phenomenal lately.
Let's look at the next 4 kind of in a group. You got the 2 remaining fights on the main card: Rivera, Yan at bantamweight, Tuivasa, Ivanov on heavyweight. And then you got 2 really nice prelim, I guess you call them co-mains: Tatiana Suarez versus Nina Ansaroff, and Aljamain Sterling versus Pedro Munoz. Sterling and Munoz are ranked higher than Yan and Rivera, but they got the preliminary card treatment. And then Suarez and Ansaroff is a good fight. They could potentially be on the main card too. Which of those 4 are you looking forward to the most, and why?
Well, that's a great question. I'm always eager to see what Peter Yan can do.
It's Peter Yan, right?
Really
not Piotr
huge
Yan.
up-and-coming prospect. Yeah, he's a really big up-and-coming prospect. But I'm just interested to see how what happens with Tatiana Suarez, because I think she's got huge superstar potential. She's, if you look at women's MMA, there's nobody even close to her in terms of how good her wrestling is. She's basically the female version of Khabib. She's able to just dominate her opponents. She absorbs less than 1 strike per minute in a fight, 1 significant strike per minute, which is just absolutely mind-boggling. So that's I think that's the one that I'm looking most forward to, is just seeing how Tatiana Suarez continues to evolve. She's a big favorite in that fight. Nina Ansaroff has been really, really high level lately. So we'll see how it goes. I don't know if she's going to be the kryptonite for Tatiana Suarez, nor if there is kryptonite for Tatiana Suarez in that division.
And then the man that we're going to speak to in the next segment, Jimmie Rivera versus Peter Yan. What do you think of that fight?
I'm just not really sure where Jimmie's going to have an advantage. I mean, if Jimmie is able to initiate grappling exchanges and make it kind of ugly, that might be his path. In the striking, I think Yan's got a pretty clear advantage over, and I think he does over lots of bantamweights, so that's not an indictment on Jimmie Rivera. But if Jimmie Rivera is able to make this an ugly fight, he can win this fight, because he'll be facing a guy that's a little bit more green than him and hasn't been put in those kind of situations much. So that's, I think, Jimmie's path. Whether he can implement that is going to be interesting. You got to remember that Jimmie Rivera is a guy who won 20 fights in a row. This is no schlub. I know he's a big underdog in this spot. He's got that veteran savvy that is going to be on display against the Peter Yan. But Peter Yan might be the best prospect in male MMA right now. So we'll have to see how it goes.
Why did the decision makers, Sean Shelby, Dana White, why did they put this fight on the main card as opposed to Munoz Sterling, considering the rankings of the 4 fighters?
I asked the 2 fighters that. I asked Munoz and Aljamain if they take offense to it, and they don't really. And in all honesty, their slot's a better slot than the pay-per-view because you're going to have more eyeballs. It's going to be on ESPN. That's where I think you want to be. Unless you're in the main or co-main event of a pay-per-view, I think that where you should want to be is on those prelims. You're just going to have so many more eyeballs on you. And I think Dana White and the UFC brass make a conscious decision to put people that they want to see, like that they want their audience to see. They put those fights on the prelim card. And that's why a lot of people are always like, oh, why is this on the main card and that's on the prelim card? That doesn't make any sense. It's not supposed to make sense. There's no order to it. It's not, this isn't like a something where the rankings matter in terms of the placement on a card. I don't think it does. I think that outside of the main and co-main event, it's, the Wild West.
Speaking of questionable decision-making, you asked Dana White yesterday why he released our countrymen, Elias Theodorou and Justin Willis. That was interesting conversation. You could see that interview on Aaron's Twitter or on TSN. What's the deal? Why do you release them?
The answer he gave me is not a good one, in my opinion. He said that they're looking for people that when they get into the rankings or that they have the potential to be top 5 fighters or champions. And if they don't have that potential, they're not going to be in the UFC. So let me get this straight. There's a guy now on this card against Eddie Wineland, Gregory Popkov, I think is his name. He's 35 years old. He's fought nothing but cans overseas. I think his last win was against a 3-3 fighter. He's fighting on this card. You think this guy's got championship upside at age 35 at a lighter weight class of 135? Like there are like 100 people almost in every division, and you're taking guys that are ranked or close to ranked and cutting them because you don't think they have championship potential. I just don't buy that. I think there's, the way that I put it to him was, how can you consider this to be a sport if you're taking people that have like an 80% win percentage and releasing them and letting people that have like a 20% win percentage continue because they put on exciting fights? Like, you've got to admit that that's an entertainment structure. It's not a sports structure or a sport model. So that's I have no problem. If Dana White comes out and says, listen, this is an entertainment business. We're trying to sell tickets. We're trying to get eyeballs. At the very top of the division, this is obviously a sport. We want to have the 2 most competitive fighters against each other at the top of the division, but ultimately we want to have the most exciting fighters in our promotion. This is the entertainment business. We have a sport. We promote a sport. That doesn't make us a sports league. If he were to just come out and say that, I would have no criticism for that at all. I think that's a perfectly acceptable answer. But if you come out and say, yeah, we're a sport, you kind of have to operate in the same means and way as a sport does. And I just don't think that the UFC does that. Again, I don't have a problem with that, but I think that should just be made a little bit clearer or acknowledged.
So you're telling me Dana White is blurring the lines between sports and entertainment. Where have I heard that before?
Yeah, fair enough. But I mean, listen, I don't want
to.
When it's compared to the WWE, I don't want to diminish the accomplishments and the hard work. And also the people of the WWE, don't get me wrong, they work really hard. They train and they put their bodies on the line, probably more so than people in MMA because of how busy their schedule is. But MMA is a sport. I have no. There's nothing about that. I don't think pro wrestling is necessarily a sport, so to speak, like in terms of the same kind of fashion, if that makes sense. Because I do actually think that the WWE has a sporting aspect to it where the most talented people do get rewarded. And that's what kind of makes it a competition. But I don't want to diminish the accomplishments of people in MMA. I just think that as a promotional entity, you have to acknowledge that as a promotional entity, your mandate is to entertain, not necessarily create a competition and a competitive structure at all times.
Fair enough. Speaking of entertainment, a week ago today, Andy Ruiz shocked the world, knocking out Anthony Joshua, knocked him down a bunch of times, actually. And people are comparing it to a Buster Douglas-like upset. Tell me, you think that Ruiz played Joshua prior to the fight, and you think boxing, the model, needs to be changed immediately?
Yeah, well, I don't know about – well, I mean, I think everybody agrees that the model needs to be changed in terms of best versus best. I don't think we see best versus best very often in boxing, and I think that's why the UFC is a more enjoyable promotion. But, yeah, I think that Ruiz was taking pictures with Joshua, holding the bell, talking about how he was eating Snickers bars, barely training, just kind of let Joshua feel like he was off the hook, like he was going to be facing, a cupcake opponent. And obviously that wasn't the case, and I think that Ruiz did a good job of playing Joshua. And I think that the idea that, now we've lost the Wilder versus Joshua fight, well, if that's what your concern is, then, why even follow the sport? Do you care about the sport? Do you care about how these matchups are made? Because my gripe is that when you have different promoters having to deal with each other to have the best people face the best people, that's a broken model. And now that Joshua's lost, he's not going to be able to face Wilder because he has a loss suddenly. I don't know. That to me seems very strange. And I think that now you've built a juicy rematch with Ruiz. And if you're a promotional entity like all of these different boxing promotions are, you should be happy that your guys lose. And I think that the UFC follows that model too. I think that when they see a Ronda Rousey lose, it builds more intrigue. When you see Conor lose to Diaz, that's what made Conor McGregor with that loss to Diaz, because he came back, bounced back, and continued. Then boxed Mayweather. He because of how he handled that loss and bounced back from it, that builds character. So I think that when people say someone's done after a loss, that's a flawed part of boxing and the allure of boxing that for whatever reason continues to live.
Fair enough. TSN's MMA reporter extraordinaire, Brock University fellow alum, go Badgers.
Yes, sir.
There, and you know it. I'll never forget where I first saw Aaron Bronsteter in you had the high socks going. He looked like one of the Royal Tannenbaums running for, what was it, class executive, class alum or something. What was the campaign about again?
Oh, that one was probably during orientation week.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, that's when me and my buddies dressed up as 1980s joggers and just jogged around the campus to calling ourselves the Brock University Jogging Club, which wasn't the real thing.
I knew that's a guy that I wanted to stay in contact with when I saw that.
Yeah, that's the kind of fun we were up to. Yeah, I did run for president also of the student union, and I did it just to be kind of like a Ralph Nader type candidate where I would just ruffle feathers. That was fun too. I had a lot of fun in university. Those were great years. Yeah,
absolutely. And you're doing an amazing job. Super proud to have you on every single time. Great interview, always great information, and we'll follow up with you hopefully in the next few weeks to talk about some other amazing cards going on in UFC, because it's a hot next couple months. It's a hot summer in mixed martial arts. Aaron Bronsteter, thank you, Aaron. Enjoy that deep dish pizza in Chicago.
Nah, ship me some Gino's Pizzeria stuff. I'll give you my address.
There you go, brother. All right, more Let's Talk Sports Radio on 94.9 Bob FM, brought to you by Gino's Pizzeria. Stick around. Welcome back to Let's Talk Sports Radio right here on 94.9 Bob FM, brought to you by Gino's Pizzeria. Joining me now, the number 7 bantamweight. He's fighting on UFC 238 today versus number 9 Peter Yan. Altera, Jimmie Rivera. Jimmie, thanks so much for taking a few minutes to chat with us. How you doing?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm good. Listen, I did a little bit of reading up on your background. You're a black belt in karate, Jersey guy. But for some of the listeners that are learning about you for the first time, tell them a little bit about how you got into martial arts and then the UFC now.
I started training at Tiger Showman's when I was 9 years old and been with it ever since. I got trained with it actually because I was getting bullied in school and I didn't know how to act at home. I was, misbehaving, and my mom brought me in for discipline, but little did she know I was getting picked on, and then a few months later, after starting Tiger Showman's, I was able to defend myself. Never got picked on again, and then got into competing with Tiger Showman's, which is like a method to teach kids. As I was growing up, it's okay if you don't win in a tournament we have every 6 months called Challenge Champions. It's okay if you don't win. It's the fact that if you lose, get back up, try again. And started competing at it. Didn't do well in the beginning, but then towards the end started winning. And I wanted to take it further, so I started competing, doing amateur fights. Amateur led to pro, and pro led to the UFC.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You're 6-2 in the UFC, 22-3 overall for your mixed martial arts career. Let me ask you this. This card, if you're a bantamweight fan of the 135 weight class, this card's a dream. The main event, obviously, for the vacant bantamweight title. Also, you have a prelim, Aljamain Sterling, Pedro Munoz, two guys you're very familiar with. But you're fighting Peter Yan, a guy who's undefeated, 4-0 in the UFC. He's got a good record as well, 12-1 overall. He's 2 spots right behind you, number 9 versus you, number 7. What is the motivation for you to take this fight?
The motivation is that I'm not too far out of title contendership. And the motivations, I got a guy that wants to come and take my head off. So I got to make sure I'm prepared, ready, so I can take his head off.
You're 2-2 in your last 4. You got 2 decision wins and 2 losses, one of which against the number 1 contender in the main event, Marlon Moraes. Without showing your hand, what do you got to do to get the win tonight?
Just be myself, go in there and fight and take it to him.
Very nice, straightforward and to the point. I like it. Let's shift to the main event. Obviously, for the vacated bantamweight title, you got the flyweight champ, Henry Cejudo, the Olympic gold medalist, versus a guy you're very familiar with, number 1 contender, Marlon Moraes. Both guys are on 4-fight win streaks. You fought Moraes. What does he have in store for Cejudo? What's this fight going to be like?
You know what? It's going to be an interesting fight. It's going to be someone that's, a good, his hands have gotten better. Boxer, likes to come forward, wrestler, Olympic wrestler against a guy that has, is well-rounded, more of a Muay Thai, kickboxing background. So it should be an interesting fight to see where it goes, if it's going to go to the ground or stay up. I think that one of the biggest advantages Marlon has is that he's he's a 135er, and Cejudo's a 125er, so he's just got a little more size on him. But it should make for an interesting fight.
If you had to make a prediction, don't worry, I don't know if they're listening, but who would you say is going to take that one?
You look at it on paper, Marlon should be the one to take it. But again, like I said, you never know.
Fair enough. Let's backtrack a few months. April, TJ Dillashaw's, suspended and stripped of the title. You're a bantamweight. You've been working hard like a lot of these bantamweight fighters. You go into your gym, your dojo. What's the conversation between you and your team knowing that the belt's up for grabs?
The fact that it came out that TJ got popped, and it kind of got the division going again and title contendership. So with this coming up with, Henry and Marlon, I'm hoping that Marlon will win, because now, if it's Henry, then it's going back and forth between 125 and 135. I'm sure he'll probably fight, 1-1, but eventually have to pick one. But with it said, it got the division going again, and I'm excited about that. There's no more stalling. Like, we could get it going and people can fight and keep the flow going.
What about the prelim bantamweight fight? Aljamain Sterling, number 3 bantamweight, a guy who beat you by unanimous decision against another guy you're familiar with, Pedro Munoz, who you beat in a split decision. They're higher up on the rankings, but you guys are on the main card. What do you think that says about you, Dana White and Sean Shelby making the decision to put you and Yan on the main card as opposed to them, which are higher ranked fighters on the I guess it's the top prelim, you say, aside from Suarez and Ansarov. Do you think that they have confidence you guys are going to put on a good show?
I think so. I don't know. I'm not in their heads. I can't really tell you on that. I think we're both we're both fighters that'll, stay in the pocket and throw down. I think that's for sure. With Sterling and Pedro, I know Pedro's a tough SOB. I fought both of them. Unfortunately with Sterling, I didn't get the win. Jimmie Rivera didn't show up that night. And with Pedro Munoz, I got the win, and he's a tough SOB. He's a really tough guy. And I think it's going to be a very interesting fight. I think at the end of it, I think Pedro on paper is the better fighter.
Let me ask you this. Let's say you beat Peter Yan. There's a couple fights coming up this summer. Of course, Fight Night 154 just a few weeks from now. You got Lineker and Font, and then the big one at 241, Sun Zhao, the number 2 bantamweight, versus Corey Sandhagen, the number 8. Do you think you're in line for a title shot next, or do you got to take the winner of Sterling and Munoz, and then maybe the winner of 241 gets the first title shot at bantamweight? How many fights left do you think you have before you get your shot?
I don't know, man. Maybe this one, or maybe one more after. I think it all depends on my performance of the night, and that's the biggest thing. I'm not really trying to look past this. I'm just trying to look at Saturday night, and focus on getting the win. But you never know what's going to happen or what they're going to throw, or kind of roll with the punches too with the UFC, and anything can happen. If I come out with a big performance though, or knockout or finish, I think it'll move me closer for that belt.
What is the biggest thing about being a UFC fighter the regular listener wouldn't know?
I think the biggest thing about being a UFC fighter, the two things is that, cutting weight always sucks. In most professional sports, except for boxing and MMA, UFC, you have to you don't have to make weight. Unfortunately, you have to do this in these sports. And then the second thing would be UFC is a really tough sport. You got to be versatile. You can't just be a good boxer. You got to be a good kickboxer. You got to know boxing. You got to know wrestling. You got to know jiu-jitsu. So you have to be well-rounded in it. And it takes a long time and a lot of experience. for you to do it, but it's a very cool art form. It's a very disciplined art form, and it's a very good art form to know just so you can defend yourself. God forbid something happens on the street.
Fantastic. Well, best of luck to you, Jimmy. Altera Jimmie Rivera, the number 7 bantamweight in the UFC, fighting tonight. UFC 238 versus number 9 Peter Yan on the main card. Best of luck, Jimmy.
Thanks a lot. Have a good one, man.